Hi, Dave Kites again from the Otto Wood Shop. This evening we're going to make a video about how to make lock miter joints using some jigs that have been made for use in our shop. The lock miter joint has a shape like this, and it fits together, I hope you can see, like this, and it makes a very secure joint with a very nice corner, and it gives a lot of area for gluing. And you probably, if you use it for boxes and things like that, where you want a nice joint that's strong without a lot of work, this might be the way to go. So it's a lock miter joint. Now you can go on YouTube and you can see people making lock miter joints. It's a joint that you make with a router bit. They usually have a set of 3 router bits. The first one, the little one, will do 3/8 to a 1/2 inch thickness of wood, thickness this way. This one in the middle does 1/2 to 3/4, and this does 3/4 to 1 1/4. You don't have a lot of leeway there on the thickness. And it's very important to know exactly what your thickness is when you're making these joints. So this is a kind of precise operation to use these tools to make these joints. When they do them on the YouTube, there's trial and error involved, or trial and adjust involved, 2 or 3 passes. There's backup pieces of wood. There's double-sided tape. There's lots of other things that are done to get the result that they want. And the reason is the one cutter has to be set at the right height, and the fence has to be set in the right position so that you cut one piece against the fence and one piece on the table. And if the fence is off, it won't fit together right. If the height of the cutter is off, it won't fit together right. So you have to get them both right at the same time and keep them there, and then cut the vertical pieces and cut the horizontal pieces. So with these jigs that I have here, we're going to set the cutter up using some guides and templates that I've made here. And then we're going to use the jigs to cut the pieces, and it all goes pretty quickly. And you're going to get very close, if not hit it right on, with one try using these jigs and this setup stuff. This was made in one try, first try. Okay. This is commercial plywood. I got some chipping out because it's plywood. If you use real wood, you'll have hardly any of that if your bit is sharp. Of course, if you have a dull bit, you always get chipping out. So the advantage of all of this is it's really less work, and the work's been done in putting this stuff together, and now it makes it relatively easy to get a good result in one shot. Okay, so here's the stuff that we're going to use to make these lock miter joints. This is the jig that holds the work for the vertical cut. Like if this was your piece of work, he's going to go in here, and then we're going to slide this over, and we're going to clamp him down, and he's going to be held on this jig, and we're going to run this jig along the fence, and it's going to cut the joint down on the bottom edge. Okay, this is the jig for the horizontal cut. This one holds the wood in here, like this, and you bring these back, and then you hold them down. Hold the wood in here. This runs against the fence this way and cuts the joint in this edge. Okay. These are standoff pieces so that we can, and there's other parts of this guy you're going to see when we do it, that holds the jig away from the fence so that we won't make all the cut on the edge in one pass, because that's too much wood to cut in one pass. So we have standoffs, 1, 2, and then no standoff, 1, 2, and no standoff. So you get 3 passes per edge, so you don't get much tear out. It's easier on the cutter, it's easier on everything. It's a good way to go. So that's what that is. The cutters are here. I told you a little bit ago that they're size specific, and we're going to use this one that does the 1/2 to 3/4, because we're going to do our demo on this commercial 3/4 inch plywood, which isn't really 3/4 of an inch anymore. It's a 32nd thinner, and we're going to talk about how we compensate for that. Because when they make these cutters, they make them very accurately, and from this corner to this corner is exactly 3/4 of an inch in elevation high, and they're lined up exactly 45 degrees to vertical. What they really want you to do to get this cutter to do both the vertical cut and the horizontal cut and have them match up, what you really want to do is get this point right here underneath in the middle of the finger. Underneath and in the middle of the finger is the center of the elevation of the cutting surface. And you want that center lined up with the center of your wood. The center of your wood lined up with the center of this, both when it's laying down and when it's up on the fence. And that's what these jigs are going to do for you. So that's the secret of making it symmetrical and the 2 pieces fitting together. You'll find they sell online lots of places pieces of plastic that have been cut in with this cutter to make one of the lock miter joints pieces, and the other side of it usually as the other piece cut into it. And they want you to put your bit in there, adjust it up and down, and put that plastic piece until it just fits in that piece, and then they say that's aligned that way, and then hold it against the fence, move the fence back and forth until it just fits on this piece, and then the fence is aligned. Well, if you have this turned a little bit sideways and not exactly perpendicular to the fence, then when you do that, you're not getting exactly right. There's play in those little pieces, and you're only contacting this edge. So it's very hard to get it in there perfectly straight and exactly contacting and get the right dimensions. These things are based on the dimensions of the router table that we have, and the fact that they've machined this cutter very carefully to exactly 3/4 of an inch high and exactly 45 degrees. And the center of the pattern is right where it is. It's on the bottom edge of the little tooth, halfway in of the tooth. That's the center of the geometric shape. And they want you to line up the center of your work, your wood piece, the center of that, line it up vertically with the horizontal piece with the center of your piece of wood, exact center. Well, this doesn't have an exact center marked on there, and when you make a pencil mark, it's about in the center, but in the exact center, And then they want you to lay them together and line up the imaginary center point with the line that you drew on your wood. Kind of hard to do. There are gauges being sold, at least one that I saw. Magnetic, it sticks on the carbide part of this cutter, and it has got a shape in it so that you snug it up against the shape of the cutter, and it's held on there magnetically, and then it has marked on that piece of metal, it has an extended vertical line and an extended horizontal line, and they are lined up with the center of the cutter. So that makes it a lot easier to take the line on your piece of wood and line it up with the extended line on that little clip that you put on there to get that one, and then this way to get that one. The little piece of metal with the magnets costs $30, which isn't going to break anybody, but it is 30 bucks. And I'm sure it works, but I didn't buy one. So here we go. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead, and next step is we're going to start to set the cutter up in the router table. Okay, so now we're going to set up the cutter in the router table with our setup equipment that we've got here. We're going to start, as you remember, we have to set the height of the cutter exactly right, and we got to set the fence position exactly right at the same time. And then we'll use the horizontal jig for the horizontal cut and the other jig for the vertical cut. So the cutter I have has a 1/2 inch shank, which I strongly recommend. It's quite a bit of wood to be cut, although you will see that the jigs have provision on them so that we cut in 3 steps for each position, horizontal and vertical. So we don't cut too much wood at a time. Now I have to set this cutter up more than you normally would because the base on the horizontal jig holds the stock up off the table a 1/2 inch. Well, very close to a 1/2 inch. It's 1/2 inch commercial plywood. So we need about a 1/2 inch of extra shaft showing here. And it's still got a very good grip on the cutter, and it's not going to come out or anything, but it's up in there about 1/4 inch, and it exposed about a 1/2 inch of shaft. The shop cutter actually has a little longer shaft, so he fits even better. He has, when you have a 1/2 inch here, he's got only about a 1/8 inch extra hole down here. So anyway, you gotta have it standing up a little higher. Yep, bad threads in the other guy. Okay. Snug him up. And now, here's the way the setup works for the vertical. This board this part is the same thickness as the base on the horizontal jig. So this replicates using that jig in that sense that the wood, our stock, is going to be, the bottom of it's going to be right at this elevation when it's on the jig. Then this piece is 3/8 inch thick. The bits are made so they're exactly 3/4 inch from this corner right there to this corner right there. Vertically, it's 3/4 inch. Halfway up is on the middle of the underside of this little finger, right in there. So we built this part, and this is 3/8. So from the top of this, where this corner is, down, it's 3/8 inch to the center. And so if we were to just put this on here and run this down and use our bar to if I could run this down far enough, and I get this top corner so it's right here, just touching the bottom of the bar. Since this is 3/8, we now know that the midline is right even with this level right here, which is the bottom of the stock, and the stock is 3/4, so we want to come up half the thickness of the stock, whatever it is. And that way the center of the cutter will be at the center of the stock. So to use a commercial plywood that's not exactly 3/4, I made these 2 blocks, and they are the same thickness, and they are exactly half the thickness of the commercial plywood. Commercial plywood's a 32nd of an inch thinner than the nominal number. So 3/4 is not 3/4, it's a 32nds thinner. So these represent, are equal to half the thickness of the plywood. So if I put this here, now all I got to do is raise this up half the thickness of the wood, a little too far. This is the most tedious part of the setup. You just want to be sure you can get this pretty darn close. Now that's just rubbing, so that's pretty good. Okay. Now, when you do the setup, you don't have to set the cutter even with the 3/8 of an inch pieces. I just did that to explain to you how it works. When you set the top even with this, then the cutter midline is right even with the top of this part of the base. So when you do set it up for real, you want to have your half thickness blocks, whatever it is, and put them on here, put the bar on here, raise the top up to it, and you're set for the height. If you're going to use stock that you've machined yourself, go ahead and make it something that is right on like 3/4 of an inch or half an inch. This cutter will cut the joint from half an inch thickness to 3/4 of an inch thickness with this cutter. The blocks I made, I only had to make because I don't have any gauge blocks that are half the thickness of commercial plywood. I have gauge blocks that are 3/8 of an inch thick, and I have gauge blocks that are 1/4 of an inch thick. So if I machine my stock to 3/4 of an inch, then, did I say 3/4? I meant 1/4 of an inch. If I machine the stock to 3/4, then I can use 3/8 gauge blocks instead of these. If I'm doing half inch and I machine my stock to half inch, I can use 1/4 inch gauge blocks instead of these. So I wouldn't have to make these. But these will be with the jig, and they'll be marked that they work for 3/4 inch commercial plywood. But now we have set that height correctly, and so I'm going to lock it in place. Okay. Now we're going to set the fence. So we have this jig, board, whatever you want to call it here. So the cleat goes in there, and now set there. Now the same half thickness blocks go here, and I just pull the fence up against it, and it's set. Oh, how does that work? That works because this board was made so right now this edge is exactly at the midpoint of the cutter. So once again, we want the stock to be halfway, half its thickness away from the midpoint. The edge of the stock, the face of the stock, half an inch away, or half a thickness away from the midpoint of the cutter. That's what this ensures happens. So now I would loosen up my sub fence and open it up so I can bring it up here, and I just push it up against here and set my distance, and I can snug this up. Now it just happens I made this piece square, so it also is making the fence parallel with this slot, which doesn't really matter in our case because the sleds that we're going to use run against the fence. They don't run in the slot, they run against the fence. So the fence could be crooked, it'll still work. But it just comes out that it's parallel because I made this guy parallel. So I set them there, and that sets the thickness this distance this way for the cutter. Now I can put my circle in because I moved the sub fence back. I can't quite reach. I could have put that in earlier, and I can't get the tool to get both holes, but I can get this one and snug it up, and it'll stay there. I know it will. Okay, then I can put my sub fence back a little bit. Be careful not to put it so that you enlarge the already cut off parts here, because people would put it too close, start their cutter up and come around and knocks it out. So we do about like that. And we'll snug up the other knobs a little bit so they don't vibrate loose and fall out. Double check our tightness here. And it's set up. Should work now. So now we're going to make the horizontal cut. Okay, so we have here now the horizontal jig, piece of stock. Just to show you again, the two blocks I made, they're nice, even, and they're the same. So this is half thickness, perfect. We use that, set it up. So we take the stock and we put it in the jig. We put this part is what runs against the fence. We put that right up against the fence, and we push our stock till he's right up against the fence. Then we bring our bar down here, hold him up there, snug up these two knobs, and then pop down the clamps. And they really hold it. So now our stock is in the jig. I had to put this bottom board on here so that I had something to push against when I lock it down with these. Without these, this piece will slide, especially when you start cutting it and you're pushing on this corner fairly hard. It tends to make the piece want to slide out of there. You can put sandpaper on these edges. It's still not as good as these clamps. These do a very good job of holding it in place. So it's securely held. Now, we're going to cut in 3 steps. We're going to use these standoffs. So this standoff is going to make the sled run away from the fence this far. Okay? So we're going to put him on, and we'll make the first pass with him starting here, and then we'll make the first pass, and then we'll switch to this one, which is thinner, and then we'll run it in the final stage with none, no standoff, and it will make the final cut. That way we take off a little bit of wood each time, and we get a much cleaner, easier cut. So we put that there, put that there. And now I'm going to turn it on, and we're going to make the first cut. So it didn't take long to make the 3 cuts, easy to change out. And there's what we did. Well, my bit's getting a little dull, I guess. It's burned a little bit here. Yep, burned a little bit. But otherwise, a nice cut of the joint. That's the shape. So that's the horizontal cut. Now, if you got a narrow piece or an extra wide piece, you see the jig will handle a piece pretty wide up to, well, if I loosen this up enough, it'll slide all the way back, you know, from here to here, 12, 13 inches. I think I had 13 something inches it'll handle. So you can make a pretty tall box. In other words, if I cut this like I just did, and then this is the side of a box, then this distance becomes the height of the box when you make the corner joint. And so a pretty deep box you could make with this if you wanted to. But what happens when you change the width and you slide this around, if you get real close and you're cutting really short, I don't know why you would, but if you did, then of course the clamp isn't going to work. So I put this little wrench here on a couple magnets, and you can use the 10 millimeter end and put it on the nut, and then take the wing nut here, loosen it up, and you can move the foot in this slot back and forth till you get it so it'll go on your wood. As many of them as you need. Okay, so let's see, I think that's all I need to tell you about the jig. Yeah, okay. All right, so we did the horizontal cut on our test piece, which could have been a real production piece. Now we're going to set up for the vertical cut. I'm just going to use the other end of the test piece, then I'll cut it and we'll see how it fits together. This is an important piece to use. Remember the bottom piece on the horizontal jig, raise the stock up off the table. This slides on the table. Okay, if I just put my piece in here like this and drop it down to the table, it's going to be too low. This piece of plywood is the same as this piece of plywood, and so if I put that there and I drop my stock down on it, it holds it up off the table the right amount. So now I can put him there. I can bring these over, tighten him up, clamp him in place, take this away, and now he's mounted and he's ready for cutting. Okay, he's up off the table, the same distance that this board held the other piece up off the table. Okay. In the back here is a little compartment, and in here are some pieces of dowel. And these are our standoff pieces. I'm going to mark these better. When you come to use it, you'll find them marked better. This says F1, finishing end first piece. What we're going to do with these dowels is put them in this hole and this hole. And they're going to stand this off the fence so that my fence is here and less of the cutter is going to contact this for the first pass. Then I'm going to put shorter dowels in, which will let it move in closer to the cutter, and then we'll make the second pass. And then I'll take the dowels out completely and we'll run on the wood and this little guy. And that'll keep us straight, but this will be up against the fence for the final pass. When you use these jigs, you're holding this wood so that it is pressed up against the fence. In this case, it's not pressed down against the table. When you do these by hand, like they did most of them do on the YouTube, you're taking that piece of stock and, yeah, come on over here, Ben. Like on the vertical cut, if this was adjusted down and it was right, you'd be wanting to take this piece and run it across there. And what you're doing is you're cutting away everything except the very edge of this piece. That's the way the cutter works. Well, when you cut away all of this wood where my thumb is rubbing, and all you have left is this edge, it's fragile. You can see it here. And if this is pressing up against the table, or this, in this horizontal case, up against the fence, you can crush this or break it off, which means then your piece is going to move. And you're not, well, if it breaks off, it's really bad, unless you can glue it back on. But if you crush this, it's no longer running straight. And so the joint's not going to be as good, not going to be as matched up. The jig holds it so that there's no pressure on the edge either time, either in the horizontal cut or the vertical cut. No pressure at all on the edge. So that's a big advantage. Okay, just wanted to mention that. Now we're going to find finished end 1, first pass. Then we're going to start on this end and finish on this end, okay? So he goes in there. And then I'm going to find S1, starting, end, first pass. He goes in there. So now this whole rig can go over here and goes on the router table. And it's been built so that I made it as long as I could and still keep a guide on the fence. Made it long so that you can do wide boards, okay? But this dowel goes right on the end of the fence. The other dowel is here, and we're not engaging the cutter at all. We've got, oh gosh, we got 1.5 inches at least before we get to the cutter. So plenty of room to plunk the assembled rig on here. Okay, so now we're stood off. The max, we're going to be stood off, and we're ready to make the first pass. So we'll make the first pass, switch the dowels to the number 2 dowels, make the second pass, take the dowels out completely, make sure this guy is adjusted right. He will run against the fence when we make the final pass. And that's just to keep us in the final pass. We're going to be running against the wood on this end, against the fence, the wood against the fence. And this end needed something to run against, or else I could twist it like that, and when I'm going across, and that of course would mess up the joint, wouldn't cut the joint right. So I wanted to be able to put pressure on both ends of the jig as it goes across. So this keeps it in contact with the fence. Okay, so right now though, we're running on the dowels on the first pass. So we did our 3 passes, and And got our piece. So this was the vertical end cut. Plywood again. Plywood separates sometimes when you get it thin. Real wood won't do that. So I cut the piece in half now so we can see how the ends fit together. This was the horizontal piece and this was the vertical piece. And there we go. Not bad. No trial and error. And actually pretty quick compared to some of the other methods. So that would work. So once again, it's a very, it's an old joint. It's been around a long, long time. And some clever guy, I don't know who, I could look it up I guess, but anyway, he invented it and made it so that you could do it with one cutter. Lots of joints are nice joints, but they're two cutter joints and they require a lot of setup to make work. And this is not trivial setup, but with the things that we went through here in the video, you can see it doesn't take too much time and not a great deal of skill. And so I think a lot of people can benefit from it. I hope they will. And that will make some nice boxes and whatever else clever things you guys think of. The only setup tools I have now are for the 3/4 inch. I'm going to make them for the half. And what I have to do, there's not much I have to do. It's just this piece, I have to make new blocks for here. These are for the 3/4, they're 3/8. I got to make some 1/4 inch ones for 1/2 inch. And maybe I'll make, well, I'm waiting to see how many people make them out of 1/2 and 3/4, and then I'll make some more if we need them. That's what I'll do. So, okay. I hope you all will practice up and enjoy using it.